Caledonian Elixir. From Glasgow, Scotland, welcome to the Caledonian Elixir. I'm your host Vincent, and we are on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter X, and there's a podcast on Spotify, so don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button wherever you find us. It helps the show out in that social media labyrinth that is YouTube, and I do appreciate it. And one more thing. Released my first article on Substack. It's just a 5-minute read, and it's under the profile Vincent Lawler. So I recommend you check that out. It's the first one, as I said, I've done, and it's always good to have some readers as well as viewers. So welcome back, and if you're finding this show for the first time, we're a podcast that covers everything from politics to the paranormal, told with wit and true grit, with guests and interview debate panels. And today's guest is a documentary filmmaker, journalist, and founder of the Canadian Patriot. I recently saw one of these documentary series, and I was impressed with it. So, without further ado, Matthew. Oh, no. Matthew Ehret, isn't it? How do you pronounce your second name?
It's pretty close. It's Ehret.
Ehret.
Yeah.
Matthew Ho, I can't believe I said it. He was a guest I had on months ago. That's the time thing I was alluding to earlier on. Okay, Matt, it's good to have you on. And where are you joining us from? Canada?
Yeah, I'm from Montreal.
Montreal. And how's the weather in Montreal right now? Because
it's beautiful. It's a beautiful, scorching hot summer day. It's the thing about this part of North America is you do get pretty broad extremes of all four extremities of the seasons, so it gives you some diversity. The winters are harsh and biting and hellish, and the summers can be tropical and gorgeous.
Yeah.
How are things in Scotland?
It is actually quite unpleasant. We're under a heat dome right now, so we are not adjusted to the warm weather, and the houses here are built to trap heat in. They're really built for winter, and we don't have AC units, so when we're getting like 29, 30, 31 degrees, we're just not used to that, especially if it's
Why
over
don't you
20
have
weeks.
AC units? Or is that so rare to have such hot weather that AC is not a thing?
I do have an air conditioner. I've had to buy one, but most homes in the UK just don't have them installed.
Well,
and it's the same with Europe. Whether you go to the Netherlands or France, they don't have ACs, most of them. So you just have to get on with it. If it is a really, scorching warm.
Is it part of the whole green eco agenda to decarbonize and to demonize ACs, or it's just not part of the culture?
I think it's just not part of the culture. As I said, the houses here were built more to trap heat in because we're used to cold seasons. It can be really cold in Scotland in the winter, just like Canada. It can be very cold in Canada, and so the homes here were built to deal with that, contend with that, as opposed to the heat. Anyway, as I said in my opening, I saw your docu-series, The Hidden Hand Behind UFOs, and it was a real knockout documentary. That stuff is like my bread and butter, and I liked how you sort of portrayed this timeline from the medieval esoteric orders to the Roswell crash of 1947. But before we get to that, you're also the founder of the Canadian Patriot. What's your mission statement there, and how did you go from the Canadian Patriot to making this documentary?
Yeah, it began in 2012 as a geopolitical. I felt like there was a vacuum of analysis that incorporated that placed Canada into a broader global context, geopolitically and economically. So I began the online journal with a little podcast to try to fill that void as best I could, and it involved trying to get a better handle on what is this strange beast called Canada in the first place that I didn't fully understand even though I was engaged in a political process. I was part of a political movement, and I didn't even know what the hell what I was born into. Why do we have a privy council? Why do we have a governor general? Why are we a monarchy to begin with? What controls the levers of power and influence, both in the present and into our deep past? And so that put me on a bit of a historical project to try to piece together a more truthful story of what made Canada the thing that it became, which was a bit of some bitter pills bitter medicine that I had to take in along the way about some sacred cows that were not true that I had to abandon.
Like what?
Hmm?
Like what? What sacred cows did you have to abandon?
That Canada is a nation state, that it exists. It actually
Right.
doesn't exist. It's a synthetic construct made by a bunch of social engineers in the city of London that has no validity
Yeah.
beyond simply the brand of the maple leaf that they sold to us. So I wrote a series of books that came out of that research between 2012 and 2015 called the Untold History of Canada book series. It's 4 volumes from 1774 when Benjamin Franklin came up here. And actually, he came up in 1776, try to organize a delegation to go down to the Continental Congress to say, okay, together as the 14 colonies, we will reject the forms of governance, of hereditary rule, of empire, and create something new. And he failed. The Jesuitical control system, the Anglican intelligence operations were very strong, more so than he realized. And it sabotaged a lot of the efforts that he had to try to persuade the French-speaking Canadians to go and join hands. So we remained loyal to the crown and have been sort of a beachhead, running insurgencies, killing presidents, running operations to undermine the more authentic aspect of what the U.S. has tended to be on occasion throughout its 250-year short lifespan. And then I did, more work along that vein, more book series, trying to piece together what is the origin of the U.S. deep state as far as it being a British-directed fifth column inside of the United States. And then at a certain point, I started realizing I have to deal with the secret societies. It's kind of like you're always bumping into them as a researcher, but it's opaque. It's full of irresponsible researchers who made messes of their attempts to try to piece together the history and the evolution of secret societies. So it's a little tinfoil hatty, but I was like, I felt equipped at this point to address it more responsibly than I would have had I not done this exercise over those 8 or so years. So from there, I did a series of books called The Revenge of the Mystery Cults. One of them is the volume 1 is Mystery Babylon and the Age of Aquarius that I published in 2024. There's volume 2 and 3 as well. And so that gave me, and my wife helped a lot with that research. She's an accomplished researcher and writer herself. And so we've been trying to piece together what is the political power structures organized by mystery cults and initiatory rituals that go back to the ancient times of Babylon, Rome, Greece, Persia. And so, we got a bit of a mapping of how the control grids work, the myth making of the synthetic gods that have always been used with sacred stories to control the human slaves in ancient times, and how those deities were retweaked by the same high priesthood using a similar formula to ensure that the slave caste remains content in their sacred superstition with artificial deities that will explain why their lives suck. And why
some things never change there because, it still seems we're doing that practice at the moment. Okay, let's turn to the hidden hand behind UFOs.
Well, yeah, this actually is a perfect bridge right into the hidden hand, because that's what my assessment, that's what the whole UFO like the entire disclosure movement, the building up of these ET the whole ET disclosure movement, going back to the earliest days of the Cold War, when it was put into motion, has always been a multi-generational magic trick devoted to creating a new array of gods for the new age after a period of tribulation and cataclysm is expected to be launched onto the world. And human beings would thus be, in the minds at least of the architects of this shit show, more inclined to accept a new array of ET AI fusion gods to accept as our new overlords. That would, in my assessment, be very useful for those behind the curtain of this Wizard of Oz play to be not held accountable for the type of genocides they expect to put onto most of humanity that they wish to depopulate.
So, can you be a bit more specific and explain the role that you think secret societies have in developing this mythos of UFOs, UAPs? It's more modern acronym.
Yeah, sure. Well, a lot of it came around through the Rosicrucian revival in the 19th century, around the figure of Edward Bulwer-Lytton and his colleague Eliphas Levi, two figures who played a very big role spearheading the revival of the occult revival, both in France but also in France and in England. But that had a global influence. The direct followers of Bulwer-Lytton included Madame Blavatsky and her new Theosophical Society, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, of which many of the founding members of the Hermetic Order were also earlier members of Bulwer-Lytton's Rosicrucian Society of Anglia, which is still to this very day is still very influential top-down Rosicrucian management sort of consortium. The idea of ascended masters communicating to adepts, whether it's Saint Germain or whether it's Master Moria or Kutume or whatever. I mean, it's a big list of the ascended Cagliostro, whatever. The idea that there are these ascended beings who have achieved, like these bodhisattvas who achieved enlightenment and chosen to communicate through some higher astral plane to adepts who have qualified themselves through initiatory rituals and rites, interfaced with a lot of the Hermetic societies that had spawned through, especially through the work of Cagliostro and his Memphis Lodge or Memphis Rite system out of France, that brought in the Egyptian rites that merged with the Mizraim rites as well.
Were these individuals not known synonymous for discovering the elixir for long life or something like that? I remember reading that there was this debate whether they lived for centuries. Count of Saint Germain and
yeah, I mean, well, they build apocryphal stories about personalities who, in some cases, are just like composite characters who represent archetypical profiles of real personalities, but Hermes Trismegistus appears to be largely a bit of a construct, but that represents actual archetypical aspects of different initiatory figures who, Hermes, Thoth, other Egyptian rites from the ancient times were put together and composed to create a personality that over time we act like was a real person. But I think there's more. It's like Christian Rosenkreutz, same kind of thing. Christian Rosenkreutz wasn't a person, but when you look at his biography that was sold to the world during the proclamations of the Fama Rosicrucianus and the Confessio and the Chemical Wedding, and the personality of this does represent actual adept individuals who did travel and were brought into certain experiences in the Middle East and Egypt and Turkey and then brought back to Europe, probably underground Templar figures who would have
I've
been...
heard the same argument for Lao Tzu. Wasn't there an argument he was more of a historical personage as opposed to like a real sage?
I got that sense too, yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
You have a similar phenomenon in the East as in the West, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And if you look at, we were discussing the secret societies, and if you look at how occultists in the early 20th century, especially the European ceremonial types, their ceremonies start to overlap with the manifestation of this phenomenon. You have Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard in the Mojave Desert with the Babylon working, and
Yeah.
they witness a UAP apparently, and then you've got Crowley's Alamantra working in 1917, where he is in communion with the Lamb, with the large
Yeah.
bulbous head and the willowy body. That's quite
Yeah.
synonymous with the image of the grave that we get much later.
Yes. Well, I mean, the description was already built up in 1903 descriptively by H.G. Wells, who was already describing the bulbous head, the nose that would recede through evolution, because the nose would be less important as human beings. He was basically extending his logic of Darwinian evolution into the future races that had evolved more adeptly on Mars and other planets, and described their feeble little bodies that didn't really need to be used so much, so they would have gotten physically small, but their hands, being extensions of their brain, would have maybe had longer fingers and a bigger bulbous head. So he's describing basically this cold, mechanistic, robotic-like, brilliant super being race, which becomes, I think, what Crowley reads and configures into the drawing that he makes describing the lamb being that he says he interfaced with in New York, in Long Island, just outside of Tesla's tower, at the site of where the Tesla tower was located, the Alhambra working. But I think that a lot of the tapestry of what Parsons, Crowley, Hubbard are all doing is following a guideline, that a scaffold, a template put together in the realm of science fiction by the followers of H.G. Wells. Right. And science fiction that he innovates becomes psychological warfare. So it's a way to declare it's sort of like a shamanistic. H.G. Wells turns the domain of science fiction into a shamanistic warfare operation against the entire collective zeitgeist, the unconscious and conscious aspects of a multi-generational audience that will be increasingly swayed into a dreamlike state of fantasy through the stories that we are allowing in with all the Trojan horses in his fiction tales. Because when you're reading fiction, you're being entertained, your critical thinking goes to sleep. It's not welcome in the realm of art. So it's a powerful place to do good, if you're a good person, to use art to bring in ideas that are edifying, or to do a lot of destruction, as a misanthropic, human-hating imperialist like H.G. Wells with the Fabian Society would be more inclined to do. And his followers became very, very influential, of which, we know that Jack Parsons was a massively inspired. His creativity, his juices were flowing just like L. Ron Hubbard around pulp fiction, sci-fi, fantasy, Arthur C. Clarke, Robert Heinlein, same deal. And the fact
H.P. Lovecraft too. He was another one who used a lot of science fiction in his work.
So and he's completely absorbing the entire space operas, and dark magical theorization of Madame Blavatsky and the Theosophist. He's just taking it all in, and turning it into fictional tales that, again, just add more meat to the bones and act and sculpt our collective dreams.
So sorry, as opposed to these writers being prophets of the printed page who can see far off into the future, and we can also take Aldous Huxley and George Orwell as examples too, Ray Bradbury as well. You think this was something else, that these people were part of our larger project that was engineering that future?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, I don't see them as prophets. I see them as being part of the thing that is doing the thing that they're writing about. The reason why they know the future is because they've been initiated to be a part of the very operation that is committed to bringing about the type of dystopic scenarios that they're then writing about.
The best way to predict the future is to create it.
That's Lincoln said that, actually. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Did he? I would like to play just a short clip, and this is germane to what we're talking about the depiction of these aliens, right? It's from a film. I could have let that run, but for time reasons, I'm not going to. Are you familiar with that one?
No, what the hell was that,
That
man?
that is called Fire in the Sky. It's a screen adaptation of Travis Walton's abduction, and yeah, I've had alleged abductees on my show before, such as Whitley Strieber. Are you familiar with Whitley Strieber?
Yeah, I got his books over there, the Communion and Them and his werewolf books. Yeah, I got those.
Yeah, I find him a very interesting guy, right? Because see, Whitley, he's not only crossed paths with like
Yeah,
these gifted children's programs. He's known as the alien guy, but he was
yeah.
also involved with the gifted children's programs, and he crossed paths with Third Reich paperclip scientists. Have you? So not only, so I'm trying to remember. Hmm. Now, see when he was a kid, he lived in Texas near at Randolph Air Force Base, I think it was, and his parents inducted him into a gifted children's program that was before Gate, right? And his health declined quite severely, and his parents then pulled him out of it. However, a Nazi scientist called Struggled, I think, I don't know how to pronounce his name. He was based at Randolph Air Force Base doing experiments at the time that Whitley Strieber was being experimented on, tested there. And it was sort of
Yeah,
like the Gate program meets a Skinner box. He was put in deprivation
yeah,
chambers and dark rooms, and they
yeah.
did all sorts. Um, so about 10 years later, we then start getting the widespread testing on kids in the UK, Canada,
Yeah.
and the US with the GATE program and stuff like that. So
You're
I
talking about
find that,
you're talking about Stargate, right?
no, I'm talking about GATE.
Oh, Gate. Okay.
Stargate was this, I'm sure Stargate was the CIA program
Oh
with
yeah.
Hal Puthoff and Ingo Swann.
But it was an extension of MK Ultra into trauma-based mind control as well. They had extensions with the Edgar Casey cult, where families from the cult would give up their kids to special programs. I've spoken
Yeah,
to several
yeah,
of their.
yeah,
It
yeah.
sounds very similar to what Stryber had gone through in the 50s.
Well,
Yeah,
this is what I was alluding to. It's like a
yeah,
streamlining process where it
yeah,
begins with the gate program, and
yeah.
I had a guest on my show called Desta Barnaby, and she was involved in the gate program. She's up in Canada near the Allen Memorial Hospital. We did a lot of those crazy experiments
Oh
up
yeah,
there.
the you and Cameron. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so and then there was the gateway process, and I've went through the gateway process myself. The
Okay.
Monroe Institute recordings and stuff, just to see
Okay.
what it was all about, if it did anything. But your docu series, right? It really does highlight the role intelligence plays in this, like intelligence officers like Alan Dulles, H.G. Wells, Aleister Crowley. How
Yeah.
influential do you think this whole intelligence community is in the UAP
It
phenomenon and shaping it?
it's like it's everything. It's always been. I mean, that's what I found. Like I used to be really so back in 2003 to 2006. I was really into the UFO UAP. Well, it was still called UFOs. It wasn't called UAPs yet. I was really into it though.
Hmm.
David, I was consuming tons of David Icke literature. I was quite down the rabbit hole. And then at a certain point, I pulled myself a little bit out of it. I felt like I was kind of losing my bearings a little bit. In psilocybin, McKenna alien communication land, and I was like, I got to really just kind of pull back, try to do a bit more research in the terrain I'm operating in, because I kept
Right.
on walking into anomalies, like Timothy Leary celebrating how the CIA is the greatest gift to mankind, and
Mm,
I up until then I was like, oh, but I thought you were one of the good guys who is helping to liberate mankind
mm,
from the shackles of the CIA. And I'm like, wait, you're saying that you've been serving the CIA? And so I kept on hitting those kinds of anomalies that were getting to me.
yeah.
um, and so that's where I went on that other journey that we began our conversation, where I was like, okay, let me just do work now to figure out, since clearly like 9/11 is an inside job. They killed John F. Kennedy. It seems to
Mhm.
be tied to what killed Lincoln. And I was like, okay, let's try to piece together an explanatory, like, how could this happen? Right? This transgenerational operation that involves clearly an adept formula of control and methodology by intelligence services that utilize occult secrecy that seem to go back to the days of the ancients as well. When I reread some of the writings of Cicero or Plato from this standpoint, I can start appreciating the battle lines that they were engaged in that seemed to be very similar to the world that I'm also living in. So I think the construct of new gods, new religious structures that are affiliated with sacred myths has always been at the heart and soul of intelligence operations that have they're not done specifically for nations or national interest or security. You know, it's not some conventional materialistic motive that drives intelligence services, whether the CIA or MI6 or MI5. It's not that. There's something at the inner core, which is why MI6 originally selected the all-seeing eye of Horus as their first, model or emblem for what they represent. It's not just a nice symbol. It actually reflect a deep religious-like belief for the high elite who put these things online for a purpose. So yeah, when I look at the UFO thing, going back to the earliest days of 1947, when the big spike in recorded sites of strange things seen in the skies was beginning, there definitely was things being seen. As I get through in episode 3 of the Hidden Hand series, I try to make the case that like people were seeing things, whether people who live near US or UK military bases, usually they were often seeing things that were inexplicable in the skies.
Yeah.
But a more reasonable explanation would be that these things they were seeing were the experimental aircraft and early drone technology that was being absorbed
can I just say,
sorry,
can I just interrupt you there? I don't think it's a coincidence that Roswell at the time of the alleged crash was the site and location of the only atomic bomber wing in the world.
Yeah, exactly.
When you think about that, is that a coincidence?
Yeah. Well,
No.
And so the myth makers will take that anomaly and then they'll say, oh, but the UFOs only presented themselves to us now because we developed the atomic bomb and they want to protect us. But they, for some reason, keep crashing. They're not good pilots at the end of the day.
Well, they're depositing. Have you ever read I think it's the author of American Cosmic, Diana Pasulka.
Yeah.
Yeah, she argues that it's deposits that they're providing us these crafts so we can back engineer the technology and discover Wi-Fi, fiber optic technology.
It's a lot to swallow, considering that these beings are so advanced that they developed this amazing technology that could like phase in out of other dimensions and go faster than the speed of light. But that they wouldn't just find a more common sense way of providing us the technology without them crashing. There's like probably a more civilized way of handing over such tech if they really did want to just provide it to us. But I think the problem with Diane Pasulka is that she gets a lot of her leads and guidance from figures who I think are less than trustworthy, like the CIA affiliated Jacques Vallée.
Oh, you know what? I think Jacques Vallée is I think he's whether you agree with him or not, you got to admit he has invested so much time and effort into doing his research. And Passport to Magonia, I think, is one of the seminal best texts on the subject of ufology, especially at the time it was written.
Well, I mean,
you don't agree with me there, do you?
It's not that original.
Well, I mean, he does expand on the airship mystery in the 19th century and how there was a lot of sightings there. And as we agree that there is something that people are seeing, and so he's not committed.
Yeah. So here's the inversion or the sleight of hand that I'm identifying, is that like with the sci-fi prophets, I'm saying they're often less prophets and more participants in the ritual to create the predictive programming into the zeitgeist that creates images of the future that are inevitable, that destroy our ability to course correct if we see something unnatural that's moving us into a bad place. Because of our collective dream being influenced by the stories, we tend to be more adaptive than human in those things. The same thing for Jacques Vallée and other occultists, since is that they're taking true phenomenon of ritual satanic abuse that people like Whitley Strieber suffered, And that they're observing that in the 17th century, 12th century, there has been this continuous trend of satanic ritual abuse, sexual molestation, even in many cases, the disappearance of children across the forests of Bohemia, And I'm seeing that that's true, that all of those things were really happening. People
Yeah,
are
well, I mean,
getting
it happens
sexually.
to this day. I mean, you can just go to the Finders
Yeah.
cult a couple of decades
Yeah, the
ago. I
Fighters Cult's a
mean,
big one, right? It's
yeah,
been
yeah,
since the 30s, frig. I mean,
yeah,
and that's just one of many networks like this, or the Process Church of Final Judgment, which seems to overlap Whitley Strieber, who described in his missing year in 1968, when he was traveling with the Process Church of Final Judgment, a Scientology spin-off cult of black magicians, preparing for the end of the world. He forgot he just lost a memory of a year of his life, and he
yeah,
has,
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
I'm
not,
like,
but
well,
it's not just.
maybe it's less aliens and more process church Satanists who are doing shit to you and giving you the type of MK Ultra experience that you had already been getting when you were a kid, that you didn't fully understand at any point in time what the hell's
Mm.
going on. But I find that a
Do-
lot of these things, unlike what Valet says, could be better explained by these Satanists doing it to us and wishing that we would then perceive the Satanists as these, intergalactic, interdimensional beings instead of being the actual satanic witch covens that have been maintained since ancient times through Diana cults of Europe, the whole uh, Western and Eastern European witch covens, the ISIS cults that masquerade under the Black Madonna worship of the Templars. These are all part of the necessary. This is like an ongoing, continuous religion from ancient pre-Christian through pseudo-Christian skin suits, all the way up through the reemergence of the Rosicrucians, which Jacques Vallée even wrote. He was a Rosicrucian, and he wrote
yeah,
that he
yeah.
was initiated
Hmm.
with J.L. Hynek, whom he
Hmm.
describes, and I cite those quotes you saw in our documentary, as having created an invisible college,
Yeah,
which Vallée was recruited into, which would have been part of what was running the Manhattan Project. That J. Allen Hynek was brought into it as a young scientist and astronomer during World War II, and sanctioned or vetted the rest of his life's course. After he read Manly P. Hall, he was brought into a Rosicrucian inner working, and then created this network of followers devoted to overthrowing an old order of outdated religions and bringing in a new order of acceptable sci-fi religions, a la L. Ron Hubbard, for the new
yeah,
dispensation.
yeah, yeah. Do you know what? I'm committed. Sorry, I'm not committed to
Mm.
the the idea that we are being visited by extraterrestrials. Nor am I committed to it as all a big psychological operation by intelligence agencies or the military. I just don't know, so I'm open to it. I'm open to hearing out anyone and who's got good information, evidence. And I mean, I asked Willie Strieber, what do you think occurred back in the 80s when you were abducted? Um, do you think you were abducted by aliens? Do you think it was a mind control thing? And he told me, he doesn't know. To this day, he's
Yeah.
not committed. He's called them visitors, but he's alleged that he had an implant taken out of his ear, and he didn't say that it was aliens who inserted the implant into his body. He said it was people. And
Mm.
this overlaps with the whole MyLab phenomenon, where a
Mm.
lot of people come out and say that the government are using narco hypnosis to basically mind control them and then impress memories onto them that they're being abducted by aliens when they're actually being implanted and taken by members of the
There's
government.
a ritual. I got a book called Creepy Crawly, which is a book on the Charles Manson ritual. So he had his family do this creepy crawly ritual by basically going into people's homes all over the suburbs,
Yeah,
wearing masks and just moving things around their house and other things to them while they were sleeping. They were using a lot of drugs. We know that the CIA were managing, CIA psychiatrists and agents were managing Charles Manson's entire career, from his
hmm,
entire time that he was in jail for years, training him in Dianetics and Scientology and auditing.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and then when he got out, and also Robert Heinlein. The two books he was reading was Robert Heinlein's Stranger in a Strange Land and Hubbard's Dianetics, which were both first published by Astounding Stories magazine at the same time, but not a coincidence, I'm sure. So that's what's helping Manson, and to have his own special Gnostic shedding of the old self in order to become qualified to be a God-man cult leader with a lot of charisma. And he's training his followers to go and carry out creepy crawly rituals, which, as far as I could see, would be it doesn't take a stretch of my imagination to see them going to houses with drugs, maybe injecting people, giving them while they're sleeping some psychedelic experience, while at the same time wearing crazy green masks, and then these people wake up in a field half a mile from their house with their ass hurting as if they've gotten pounded, and holes in their arms or whatever, with no clear memory except fragments of grays looking at them, and then wandering back home in a stupor. I could see that much more. I can believe that and imagine that, knowing that these rituals do exist, more readily than I could advanced civilizations that have gone so far into scientific excellence that they could then come. And I'm not saying that advanced civilizations don't exist. I'm saying that I think it's very likely that in our big universe, other cognitive beings probably have emerged in other star systems or in our own galaxy, maybe. Sure, I'm open to that, very much so. But the stories that we're being given, of these specific stories of all of these close encounters of this third and fourth kind, especially of the occult sexual molestation type, that all seem to occur beginning in the 1960s. And then they spike in the 70s and 80s, right at the time when you have Satanists who have come back from Vietnam, like Colonel Aquino, who was a leading Satanist who was overseeing Project Operation Phoenix, a mass genocide campaign of civilians in Vietnam for 8 years, like Marlon Brando shit from Apocalypse Now. That stuff's real.
That's a phenomenal film. Phenomenal film.
Phenomenal.
And there are so many overlaps because, Hal Puthoff, Ingo Swann, these guys were Scientologists, and didn't Manson get in his family, whatever you want to call them, didn't they get treatment from the Haight-Ashbury clinic where Jolly West was working at the time? So there are so many overlaps, and again, the belief in alien contact in the Anglo-American world, and again, that's so interesting that it's Anglo-American world. I mean, there are sightings all over the world, but not comparable to the number of sightings you get. That's
very distinct. It's very specific to the Anglo-American world. That's right. Yes.
And you're connecting it to the belief systems, of the formations of new belief systems, and how it's transforming. Even individuals with a traditional religious hermeneutic, they now look at, say, or they interpret biblical events such as Ezekiel's chariot now as a UFO encounter. Or you have groups such as the Raelians, Scientology, Heaven's Gate. I've got someone from the Raelians cult, they sport something like 100,000 members coming on my show soon. I just want to talk to these people. I just want to know, why they think what they think. And are you familiar with Heaven's Gate?
Yeah, sure.
Right. And that's a cult that's blended with Christianity, where they interpret scriptures through a sort of modern linguistic cultural matrix, angels as demons and ascension as evolution, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it has a theosophical vibe, a Christian theosophical vibe to it.
Yeah. Well, I'd just like to play a clip, right? Because these guys are really interesting to me, the Heaven's Gate lot.
We're going to talk to you about the most urgent thing that is on our mind, and what we suspect is the most urgent thing on the minds of those who will connect with us. We'll title this tape Planet Earth About to be Recycled. Your only chance to evacuate is to leave with us. Planet Earth about to be recycled. Your only chance to survive or evacuate is to leave with us. Now you keep saying us. Who do you think you are? Well, I, in all honesty, must acknowledge my father. My father is not a human father. My father is a member of the evolutionary level above human, the kingdom of God.
Right. Heaven's Gate, as you know, committed ritualistic suicide in a mansion in Santa Fe, California in 1997. And that was, so did their leader, the man you saw there, Marshall Applewhite. He committed suicide that night. And the reason that I'm interested in these new age groups that use the UFO as a symbol, a sort of technology as a sacred symbol. Do you think we are witnessing the emergence of a new Anglo-American religion?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, that's what they want. Like what is fringe one generation is what becomes the mainstream 2 or 3 generations in the future. So the things that people thought of as being kind of the absurd, aetherius society, or the followers of George Adamski, or the I Am movements, which seems kind of silly, kind of eccentric in the 40s and the 50s, or L. Ron Hubbard's thing, which again seems kind of silly, especially when you hear the disclosures of what the higher OT operating thetans who leave reveal they've actually been told is what is true, and what is shaping all of human evolution and all of our psychological problems are these archonic like elemental demon entity spirits that were deployed by the Federation of Xeno and disembodied into volcanoes, and that's the big thing, is to figure out how do you purge yourself of these foreign entities to become again self-actualized and liberated from the effects of these artificial alien traditions that shape our culture, that shape our norms, our ethics, our morality. And so it's only by being purged of the belief in right and wrong, of the power of conscience that was put on us to keep us from having and developing our magical powers of clairvoyance and astral projecting superpowers. Basically, that is what they want. They all want. That's what all of the Project Stargate, trauma-based mind control children are put through these traumatic experience with the idea that they will be able to actualize their superpowers and develop super soldier capabilities if we just abuse them a bit more. So this is a weird thing that people who go through these initiatory experiences in the Scientologists and what have you describe. But I think at the end of the day, what these Anglo-American overlord types would like is for these fringe UFO cults to become the new mainstream religions for the new millennium. But it would have to accompany first. We won't just accept that sort of change. I think that's partially why they want some shock therapy, so that the unthinkable could become thinkable after we're pulverized for a period, which is
future
a
shocks.
Distasteful idea. Yeah.
Or future shocks or depattering. You can take your pick.
Yeah, it's that whole Alvin Toffler thing. Yeah, and it's exactly it. Yeah.
There's so much of what you say that I agree with, from your geopolitics to your criticism and being able to pull back the veil and see the operation that is happening using UAPs on the public to persuade us that something beyond human is happening when it is very human, all too human. But there's something that you do say that I would like to challenge you on, right? I would, because I mean, to me, I'd like to not just go up with what someone says and just nod my head, and if there's anything that I think,
push back, dude. No, this is a conversation. Yeah, push. Don't worry.
So
I won't be offended.
It's when you brought up, I heard a podcast where you were discussing Gnosticism, Christian Gnosticism, right? So can you just, in a sort of general terse way, provide me with your view of Gnosticism, and I'll tell you what my position on this is.
It's hard to label because there's so many different variations of Gnosticism. So the thing that's called Gnosticism isn't really just one thing.
Yeah.
There's many variations of the theme. So the way I tend to look at it, and you can correct me as far as your understanding of it is concerned, there are a variety of movements, often not always, portraying themselves as being followers of Jesus, but with special teachings that were not part of the official canonized doctrine, as part of the Bible is concerned.
Mm-hmm.
There's again, I say often, but not always, because you've got Jewish Gnostic sects as well, Cerinthus, the followers of Cerinthus being. So I see it as what I look at for what gives me the negative assessment that I tend to have when I talk about Gnosticism is the what I disagree with. And again, maybe I'm wrong, and maybe I'm not seeing things in a nuanced enough way. Is that there is a tendency across the board to see creation as ultimately a prison created by a lower demiurge that is endowed with the force of ignorance and pride that created the entire world and all of the material and immaterial aspects of creation. The Yaldabaoth character featured in the Apocryphon of John, or the Secret Apocryphon of John, and that we are made in the image of this ignorant sub-elemental that spawned out of Sophia, sort of this androgynous entity of an elemental that there's different variations, but the ones that I see is that she basically procreated with herself, gave rise to the Yaldabaoth character, and the Yaldabaoth character then created all that is, and that our job is to then liberate ourselves from the fallacies that Yaldabaoth created in the material and moral world through rites that were touching upon a secret doctrine of a different kind of character of Jesus portrayed in some of the Nag Hammadi texts. So I don't know, like the Gospel of Philip or Thomas. So I don't know. Am I missing anything on that point?
Well. So when I look into the history, and I'm not an expert by any means. Now I haven't even read all the Nag Hammadi texts. I've read something, maybe I think there were over 50 that were recovered, and I've read something like 17, 18 of them. So I haven't even read them all. However, I think when you look into the history of religion and you have the mythos emerge, it usually emerges from an event or a number of events. And when you get Christianity, we've got the crucifixion and the resurrection, just to name a couple of events. And I think this is usually followed by different interpretations of the events, and then this is followed by the emergence of different sects and then different institutions. You get Valentian Gnostics, Nazarenes, Ebionites, and then you can fast forward to the 4th century, and you can get the Roman Catholic Church and the Protestant Reformation, the Orthodox. So there was obviously a rivalry taking place between a lot of the different sects in the 1st and 2nd century, right? And when you read, say, the Gospel of Thomas, I think it's closer canonically to the New Testament Gospels than, say, the Gospel of Philip is, or the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. They're very different. However, I didn't find anything sinister or anything that was promoting animal or human sacrifice. And that's what I take issue with. I heard you say something.
Oh, yeah, you got that, though. No, I'll actually... Here, 1 second. Let me just pull it up here. So in Thunder Perfect Mind, you've got the convergence. So there's a one of the Nag Hammadi texts is called Thunder Perfect Mind, in which you do have a very vile concept of the importance of the convergence of opposites, moral opposites, as well as sexual opposites, but moral opposites, good and evil, being resolved into nothingness. Hold on 1 second. Let me see if I got them. I cite a number of the more displeasing selections from the Nag Hammadi in my volume 1 of Mystery Babylon, The Age of Aquarius. So I published this as part of my Revenge of the Mystery Cult series. So, 1 second. So the trimorphic protonoia, speaking of the voice of God, says, I am the voice. It is I who speak with every creature. Now I have come a second time in the likeness of a female, and I have spoken with them. I have revealed myself in thought of the likeness of my masculinity. And then I am androgynous. I am both mother and I am father, since I copulate with myself and with those who love me, and the womb that gives shape to all. I am the Meorthria, the glory of the mother. So you've got this weird convert this androgyny idea, which I think is part of the organizing ritual of a lot of the like the Cybele Attis cults, where to be a higher divine hierophant, a member of the Cybele Attis Church of ancient Rome, you had to basically castrate yourself and become an androgynous, cross-dressing, holy man woman thing.
You do, and as you do know, because that does happen a lot, especially with shamanic initiations. There's a lot of androgyny, transgenderism with shamans. So this is something that's very cross-cultural. It's more.
I think a lot of this stuff is actually, you'll find that a lot of this, though, like my wife did a book on the shaping of world religion back in 2023, going through the Jesuits, Freemasons, and anthropologists that created the ghost dance religion. And a lot of the sacred myths of the natives of North America were actually influenced and shaped over centuries by the Jesuits that that manipulated their own sacred stories and created new sacred myths for the natives to become tools of the Jesuits to self-exterminate, including the ghost dance religion itself, which is purely a Jesuit Freemasonic concoction. So I think in a lot of the cases of some of these shamanic, anthropologists are deployed to go and speak with natives in the Amazons or in Africa and document what are the rituals, what are the beliefs. Oftentimes they work with the British or the French Empire, these anthropologists who are deployed around the world to develop their assessments. I think they're not exactly being objective scientists. I think they're actually participating in the thing that is influencing. They're not always just, a lot of these beliefs are not always as pure and authentic from those cultures as we would like to believe. So there's that aspect of it.
And it can also happen with bodhisattvas, where they like to transcend the masculine and the feminine. That's kind of why they've stepped back, or one of the reasons why they've stepped back from society and culture. They feel like they're the wise elders that have transcended the customs and the
I agree that
roles
there is something that transcends sex and what have you, those dualities, but I think that there's a lawful and an unlawful way of doing it. And the problem with the word of bodhisattva as we utilize it is that so much of it is influenced by the 200 years that the British Empire controlled India as their crown jewel and really fucked around with their own stories. And the Theosophists really had a field day running with and then giving Western audiences, and including also Indian audiences, the real, like Gandhi said that he learned how to read the Upanishads by being a part of the Theosophical study groups in London when he was a student. They're the ones who taught Gandhi how to understand what it means to be an Indian and read your Vedas and Upanishads. So I'm like, the Theosophists have they created the India Congress Party. It was Blavatsky's disciple, Alan Octavian Hume, who was a British civil servant in India, who created the India Congress Party to absorb all of the different rebellious groups into a more controlled, acceptable rebellious group, like they did in Ireland too. By directing attention away from the fight for real independence and towards home rule. We want good, responsible government. And so that became a pressure valve, a pressure release. But the Theosophists are all over the place, while at the same time they're also creating the UFO cults. So a lot of the UFO cults that come out of 1946 onward by George Adamski is a former high priest of the Theosophical Royal Order of Tibet in California. The guy who creates the Aetherius Society in England, he's a Theosophical high priest in England before he creates the Aetherius Society in 1948. The I Am movement of Guy Ballard and Edna Ballard, that's channeling Saint Germain on friggin' Mount Shasta. These guys are talking about meeting Venusian Aryan super beings from Venus back in 1934, before anyone else is doing it. But they're part of a Theosophical black magic priesthood tied to the Hermetic order of Amorc, right? So you got these Theosophical things at the heart of this new UFO religion that's tying in demonology and UFOs already in the 30s and 40s. but they're also
Well,
controlling
there is
India.
there is another example of that, and you're right. The cultural
Yeah.
matrix in which it comes from is so important. But you can take someone like I think it was Paramahansa, Swami Paramahansa Yogananda, and who brought a lot of the you know I think it was Raja Yoga to the West over to the United States, and then he wrote the Yoga of Jesus and the resurrection of
Yeah.
I think it was the resurrection of Jesus, and he interpreted the life and the scripture of Christ as Christ being a yogi. And again, you look at it from his upbringing, his cultural matrix. He was from India, and that's so.
Well, he had a
That's
handler. I mean,
paramount.
he was part of a Kali priestess, so he's part of a Kali cult, which has the
Paramahansa was part of a Kali cult, really.
no Vivekananda. Vivekananda was
Swami Vivekananda.
Yeah,
he was the one. Yeah, he was. I'm getting confused. Yeah, he was the one that brought over Raja Yoga, and Paramahansa was the one that brought.
But he also had a theosophical handler, because every Kali priest has a Kali priestess handler, the mother. What's her name? She ended up training Aurobindo, Sri Aurobindo, after Vivekananda, and she might have killed Vivekananda. I think Vivekananda might have been an honest guy, but his death seems suspicious to me in 1901. I feel like this woman who was tied to Annie Besant, who was this Irish.
What was suspicious about his death, or what do you think was suspicious about?
He died too early, too young. It seems like he was planning a lot of things that might have been disruptive to what was expected of him at that time, because he was playing a big role in the 1893 Chicago World's Fair was a very big coup d'etat. It was like those who had carried out the Civil War, who murdered Lincoln, who just murdered President Garfield. It was I wrote a book on the Civil War and how it was orchestrated by the United Grand Lodge of England and their branches in America, especially the Scottish Rite of the South and the North at the same time, both North and South. But see, these figures, that's partially what Colonel Olcott was doing, the co-founder with Blavatsky of Theosophy. His former position before setting up Theosophy was he was on the 3-man committee to investigate the causes of Lincoln's murder, which ruled kind of like the Warren Commission a century later, that it was a lone gunman and there's nothing else to see there, despite all of the evidence that John Wilkes Booth was in fact actually a member of this Order of the Golden Circle, which was what became the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan later on, but it was an occult initiation paramilitary force, kind of like a proto-Nazi group inside of America that the Confederate leadership were overseeing from the 50s onward. So he basically ran cover protecting that thing, directing it all to it's a lone gunman story, and then he was immediately set up with Blavatsky in New York to then create this new Theosophical Society with the objective of trying to take kind of a sample of all of the world's mystery religions and create this stew, this hodgepodge perennial philosophy that would then absorb everybody. It was supposed to be like the maximum absorption ideology that they wished to create, that would then mimic elements of everybody's faith in the world, but absorb everybody into something meta. And their 1893 World's Fair was a major victory for the occultists, who brought in Vivekananda, who did the opening ceremony, the keynote address that was like publicized in all the newspapers. But it was a sort of a syncretic. It wasn't really like authentic Hinduism. It wasn't Indian philosophy in an authentic way. It was very selective and fused with elements of Western theology and Christianity to create something that would be more pliable for East and West.
And so is Paramahansa's Yogananda's work. I don't know if you've read the Resurrection. I think it's called The Resurrection of Christ.
I didn't read that one, no.
Yeah, that's like 4,000 pages long. That is one long, hard-blooded read.
Have you read that?
Yeah, and it wasn't. Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's parts of it I enjoyed, but once you get to page 1,500, I'm sort of like, right, you're repeating yourself quite a lot. And from what I understand, what it is it's basically a collection of a lot of different articles he had published over a number of years. So,
And
you
what's the
know,
thesis? Like, what's he getting out of the resurrection idea? Like, how does
well,
he address it?
he's interpreting the teachings of Christ through the lens of a yogi, a
Okay.
yogi mystic, and he sort of dismisses a lot of the cultural stuff, the fact that Jesus grew up was in a in Jewish culture. He doesn't really, and again, I don't know your denomination. I don't even know if you are a Christian.
I mean,
However,
I'm a philosopher. I consider myself a Platonist, so I'm just looking for what mythologies make people better people in harmony with God, and which ones take them out of whack and make them more slavish. So that's how I
so
tend to approach.
so for example, I'll give you an example. So when Jesus describes himself as the Son of Man, he's saying that he's the descendant of King David. So when that's what the Son of Man was, someone that was of
Mm,
divine descent. And so Paramahansa's interpretation of that is that he is saying he is born of a man, and that
right,
therefore he will be reincarnated, and that in a previous life he was Elijah. So he is the reincarnation of the prophet Elijah, and this is
right.
why he is innately wise, and he can
Okay.
teach all these things about the previous prophets because in previous incarnations he was these prophets.
Yeah.
So there is that clash in terms of interpretation. But that's what I was saying earlier, that you do get these events,
Mm,
and with Christianity, probably the most important events are the crucifixion and the resurrection. And then it's just followed by so many different interpretations, and then this is
yeah.
followed by so many different sects. And
Sure.
Yogananda seems to be another incarnation of it, someone that's just interpreting it through their own
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
yeah, dude. Like for me, that what gives value to any religious faith and sacred story tied to any of the faiths is the elements that teach us to tap into what truly makes us divine and good. As far as um, oh, my image just got screwed up there. That's kind of weird. Can you see my image? Okay, it seems
Yeah,
like I'm all
your image is fine.
elongated. Yeah. Oh, okay, cool. But like the lessons, the moral lessons to love thy neighbor, to even love thy enemy if need be, to turn the other cheek, to tap into the power of true agapic love, which makes us immune from the conditioning and the manipulation and the seductions of empire and the types of techniques that empire will typically deploy to bring about the worst part of ourselves. That has immortal value for me, and I see that strewn throughout so many of the stories of the Gospels and throughout the writings even of Paul, different philosophical lessons that tend to bring in a harmony of the self with the divine in a way that I think is dignified. And I find it also in some Jewish, less so maybe it's more of a messy thing to look at the Old Testament, but there's throughout the book of Isaiah, or, Chronicles and varieties of places, there's also like nuggets of these great gems of wisdom
Hmm.
that would make anybody who focuses their minds and meditations on and actions on those particular lessons will become a better person, less inclined to be a slave, more inclined to fight empire and to look for other people in another faith that have a similar attitude in terms of how they looked at their Confucian texts and lessons, or their how they read and what lessons they took from the Vedas and these epic stories you get throughout the Upanishads. Some people might latch on to something more superficial, more like entertainment oriented. Other people might latch on to the moral beauties, that would make you just cry tears of joy for the sacrifices people were willing to make for justice and their children. So I think the oligarchy, they just really want to eliminate those transformative insights that are embedded in the sacred texts and bring about a focus to reprioritize how we think of religion as being something that is tied to supernatural beings, superpowers, the supernatural things that I find are less relevant for me than the moral metaphysical lessons. For me, that's where the principal attention should be paid. So for Blavatsky and company, I think that they just focus more on the mystification and the supernatural way too much. And yeah, I do think Vivekananda was probably. I mean, he died at a very young age, and the fact that his handler, what's her name, an Irish woman, I'm forgetting her name, but she wrote a book on Kali the Mother. But she became also a person who trained Sri Aurobindo. Sri Aurobindo goes before he became a guru. He was known as the Mazzini of Madras, and he was a terrorist. He was basically fighting British Empire by blowing things up, and he found himself managed first by this Irish woman until she dies in 1912, and then he's all of a sudden managed by a new Kali priestess, Mira Alfaz, who was part of the. There's this Max von Theon. Max von Theon is this occultist tied to the Crowley networks of Russia, but he sets up an operation in Algeria.
Crowley networks of Russia. I knew you had an American OTO and a German OTO, and there was that conflict between those sects. And then you've got the Golden Dawn that was but a Russian sect of Thelema.
Crowley heads.
Yeah, is this Thelema?
I don't know to what degree they were Thelemic. They basically get taken up later on by Gurdjieff and the Uspensky circle. Which is set up in the 1920s, but the Gurdjieff network takes up. Crowley is already building up his network in Russia in 1901 because he's a British intelligence agent who's deployed using the cover of his role as a magi to be accepted in certain royal courts that are into spiritualism. So he's an adept and, very prolific in different yoga sutras and whatever, and also, Irish mysticism. And he's got the druid thing down. He's got it all. So he can speak all sorts of languages. He can travel in different courts. He's got a certain charisma. And so he's got access and can report. He can both report back to British intelligence, which recruited him it was this guy, Lord Gascoigne Cecil, who recruited him when he was still a student in 1897, before he even goes into the Hermetic Order. That's his patron. And then also he can influence, in turn, also the royals who are into, supernatural mysticism and superstition. So he's then in turn infusing, nudging ideologies into guiding his little networks that he's building up. And again, later on, Gurdjieff during World War I picks up a lot of the slack in the Russian case. But there's another vein from the Blavatsky networks, because Blavatsky, you see, her grandfather was the head of the Rite of Strict Observance, and the Rite of Strict Observance was set up by in the 1750s or 1740s. Which seems to be a proto or a sort of, I think it is a Rosicrucian pseudo Masonic lodge, which then gets imported into Russia in it's around the time 1780s, and it grows quite fast. And it promotes a lot of the ideas of the Theosophists, of ascended masters, invisible, the hidden chiefs, the secret chiefs that communicate with the adepts from the Rite of Strict Observance, so you got a lot of the elements of the Rosicrucian and Theosophical thing. So Blavatsky's grandfather introduces her to his occult library when she's a girl. Her mother is the official translator into Russian of the writings of Bulwer-Lytton that we'd been talking about, right? The guy who's popularizing Vril and the coming race and all that shit.
Yeah.
So that's her mother, is the translator of Bulwer-Lytton's works, that is immersing her as a young girl, a teenager, into his writings before she goes off to her world tour, out of which she gets initiated into the Brotherhood of Luxor, the Hermetic Brotherhood of Luxor in Cairo. She gets brought into the Rite of Memphis Misraim in 1889. That's an officially recognized initiation that she was brought into. And So you have
Sorry
so what
for
is she
interrupting.
in Russia? Yeah,
Sorry for interrupting.
Yeah.
Have you read an author called Peter Lavender?
Is what?
Have you read an author called Peter Lavender?
I've read many books by Peter Lavender. I
Yeah,
have
it's just
none
that
of
what you're describing to me. I was reading one of Lavender's books very
which one?
recently. Well, I've actually been reading a couple.
Mm,
I was reading Starry Wisdom and Dunwich, which is it's
mm.
like Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code meets H.P.
Yeah,
Lovecraft.
he's a great writer.
Yeah, it's like fiction, but then I was reading the what do you call that? The political grimoires that focuses
Oh, it's
on
the Sinister Forces.
Sinister Forces. Thank you.
I got it
Yeah,
right there. Yeah, no,
and a lot of things you were listing here. Sorry, it just popped into my mind. Sinister Forces, because
yeah,
it mentions a lot of those movements, and I was like, right.
yeah. No, he's got quite a good mapping of it. I'm not. I presume there's a slight chance he might himself be doing a controlled disclosure as an initiate himself. It's possible.
Oh, he's involved with intelligence agencies. He's even acknowledged
Yeah, he
that.
is. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I read him with a bit of a grain of salt, but it's highly useful. His mapping is very useful. All that to say, the right of the right of strict observance and the theosophists are like this. In Russia, you also have the Martinist order, which is also tied to the theosophists. People like Gerard and Kaus.
Were they Portuguese Martinistas?
Yeah, I think originally.
Right.
Yeah, and the Martinists had big penetrations into the high courts and high nobility of Russia as well. And Gerard and Kaus, who's known as Papos, becomes an advisor and personal physician to Nicholas II. And him and other leading theosophists, I name a number of them in my book, they're literally creating the protocols of Zion as an operation to persuade Nicholas II to bring back the pogroms, to convince him that there's this Jew conspiracy to kill the royals of Europe and to create a Zionist superstate. Now, there's an element of truth in the protocols as far as like what they're revealing, but it's still a hoax, and they're creating a forgery because it's a limited hangout. You reveal a bunch of the truths of the conspiracy, but then you introduce some Trojan horses, some scarecrows, some deflection, and you can create a controlled hate that gets certain results, like the clampdown of many Jews that then becomes a self-feeding thing. So Pappas and these guys are doing that. This guy Max von Theon is interfacing with the Pappas network when he's setting up his cult in Algeria. This woman, one of his leading disciples, is this ISIS priestess figure, Mira Alfaz, who then is deployed to Adyar into India to then manage Sri Aurobindo, who creates his famous Aurobindo ashrams, which become a major conditioning center for decades and decades and decades, even after Aurobindo dies. The mother, Alfaz, is still operational, training and initiating high value personalities who are sent to her to be deconstructed in this weird ashram that involves kind of uniting sex and death in some weird convergence of opposites. And that's the other thing I forgot to mention too. Because you were asking about the Gnostics, and I found the thing on the womb. So there's one of the Gospels of Seth within the Sethian Gospels of the Nag Hammadi, and it describes advice on how does any wise man wish to understand the future in the heavens. It's to cut out the womb of a living pregnant woman. And I'll just read it. I quote from the Gospel of Seth: "Heaven and earth have a shape similar to the womb. And if anyone wants to investigate this, let him carefully examine the pregnant womb of any living creature, and he will discover an image of the heavens and of the earth." There's a number of other things that are like that.
Where does it say cutting out a fetus or a baby from? Does it?
Well, that's the plausible deniability section, because then when I look at what a lot of the followers are actually,
you could take that as a metaphor, symbolism.
That's why all of these mystical orders, they use a language of ambiguity for plausible deniability. So there's always this esoteric inner teaching and an exoteric outer teaching for the uninitiated. So for the uninitiated, they're given the clean, sanitized interpretation of the words. And then for those who pass their whatever, I don't know, 6th degree, 7th degree, I don't fucking know. But at a certain point, you're allowed all of a sudden to receive the proper meaning of the symbols you thought you were using in a different way when you were stupider. And now all of a sudden you get to know the real game. And it's usually the inside out game of everything you thought was the good is actually the bad, and the bad is actually the good.
I've actually not read the Gospel of Seth. What was it called again? What is its full title?
In my book, I only cited the Gospel of Seth. There is probably a secondary title to it, though.
Right.
Undoubtedly, there's a secondary.
I've not, as I said, I've not read all the Nag Hammadi texts. I'm aware there's over 50.
No, I mean it's another one too from Thunder Perfect Mind is I am the first and the last. I am the honored and the scorned. I am the whore and I am the holy. I am the wife and I am the virgin. I am the mother and the daughter. I am knowledge, but I'm also ignorance. I am shameless and I am ashamed. I am the strength, but I am fear. I am foolish and I am wise. I am godless and I am the one who is God. So it's that's from Thunder Perfect Mind.
Is that from the Gospel of Seth?
No, that's from the Thunder Perfect Mind, also a Nag Hammadi.
Wait, what century was that written in? Do you know?
It's not a big one. Thunder Perfect Mind is a short one. It's maybe 30 pages.
That's like something I would expect to read in the Book of the Law.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's the big joke, right? Exactly.
I'm really surprised by that. That's not like anything I've read in any of the Gnostic Gospel, texts.
There's a lot of this stuff, man. Yeah.
Listen, Matthew. As I said, when we started this, about the timing thing. Look, okay. I've enjoyed the conversation, and I also know you cover geopolitical stuff, so I could go on hours listening and doing a conversation even on the geopolitics stuff. So again, maybe you could come back on and we can do something like that. But again, if you want to promote anything, tell the audience where to find you.
They can go to CanadianPatriot.org for my videos, my books. They're all easy to find. Substack, my MatthewEhret.substack. I usually put out things every day, maybe every 2 days, mostly for free, but not always. And finally, RisingTideFoundation.net is my educational, cultural site that I run with my wife as a nonprofit, and that's a little bit more on the feed the soul side, a little bit less of the woo stuff that we've been talking about, a little bit more on the classical art and beauty stuff. So that's RisingTideFoundation.net.
Matthew, it's been a pleasure having you on.
Hey, it's a pleasure being on. Thanks.
Right.
Bye.
Good night. And that was Matthew Ehret. Hopefully I've pronounced his surname correctly this time. And if you enjoyed, don't forget to drop a like. And if you really enjoyed, you can donate at the Caledonian Elixir / Buy Me a Coffee. The description link will be on the video. And the next guest, I think I've got him on in the 6th. He is a well-known evangelist and exorcist called Bob Larson. So that'll be something different. It's been a while since I've had an exorcist on the show. And just remember, there's a lot of people willfully, intentionally spreading chaos in the world. Don't you be one of them. So everybody be cool. You be cool. And good night.
Gold-pressed platinum, slip strips and bars. If you ever find some, you can lose it in quartz. Get a Ractogino, spin the double wheel. Order a black hole, just depends how you feel.